Okay, we're going to take a brief look at the three facsimiles in the Book of Abraham. These were drawn by Abraham, included in the record, and at least the first one is directly referenced in the first chapter, when it says, he describes the altar that the priest of Elkanah tried to sacrifice him on, and he refers us to the facsimile at the beginning of the record. So this is it. And you can see here, we got a very Egyptian style picture. Figure 1 is the bird, the dove, and this is the angel of the Lord. If you recall, in the story, the angel of the Lord appeared to protect Abraham. 2 is the man laying on the altar, and this is Abraham, as he has been tied to the altar. 3, the man standing with the knife, the idolatrous priest of Elkanah, attempting to offer up Abraham as a sacrifice. 4, the altar for sacrifice by the idolatrous priests standing before the gods of Elkanah, Libnah, Mamachra, Korash, and Pharaoh. And then starting with 5, we get all these pagan gods. 5 is Elkanah, looks kind of like a falcon head. 6 is Libnah, that's jackal head. That's what we today refer to as, not Horus, but I can't remember the guy's name. Yeesh. Anyway, 7 is Mamachra, looks kind of like a lion type head. 8 is Korash, have no clue. 9 is the idolatrous god of Pharaoh. That's kind of hard to see. It's this little alligator guy down in the lines there. Hard to pick out. 10 is, we have this, looks like an urn with some wheat stalks on it, and this is to represent Abraham in Egypt. And 11 is these vertical lines down at the bottom, designed to represent the pillars of heaven as understood by the Egyptians. And 12 is these diagonal zigzagging lines. Rokiang, signifying expanse or the firmament over our heads. But in this case, in relation to this subject, the Egyptians meant it to signify Shamal, to be high or the heavens, answering to the Hebrew word Shamayim. Don't ask me to interpret those. I'm not sure what any of that means, but it's basically, you have the pillars of heaven, meaning this is what holds the heavens up, and then the rest of it is the heavens. So this is to represent, I think, the ideas of the Egyptians and how the Egyptians viewed their religion and everything. But exactly, it is him being sacrificed to the pagan gods, but exactly what the pillars of heaven and the Rokiang or all that stuff, I'm not exactly sure what the symbolism is there. So let us flip over. Actually, let us look at facsimile 3 next, because number 2 is a bit more complicated. 3 is pretty simple. So we have here figure 1 is the guy sitting on the chair. It says, Abraham sitting upon Pharaoh's throne by the politeness of the king, with a crown upon his head representing the priesthood, as emblematical of the grand presidency in heaven, with the scepter of justice and judgment in his hand. There you go. So the king is allowing Abraham to sit on his throne. Figure 2, the guy behind the throne, King Pharaoh, whose name is given in the characters above his head. 3 signifies Abraham in Egypt, as given also in figure 10 of facsimile 1. You get, note again, kind of a standing urn with wheat stalks. Number 4, first guy to the right of Pharaoh, the prince of Pharaoh, to the right of Abraham, the prince of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, as written above his hand. 5, Shulam, the next guy over, one of the king's principal waiters, as represented by the characters above his hand. And 6, Olimla, a slave belonging to the prince. Abraham is reasoning upon the principles of astronomy in the king's court. That's what this represents. And I do want to point out a couple of things here you will note. in reading Abraham, we know the Egyptians, the original Egyptians, were the descendants of Ham and therefore would have been black. They would have had dark skin. But in this picture, we see Abraham with the king, the prince, and his servant, or the principal waiter. None of them are black, but the slave standing next to him is black. And this lines up with at least the theory, which I'm personally endorse the theory, that when Abraham went to Egypt, it was shortly after the what are known as the Hyksos people kind of conquered Egypt. Now, the Hyksos, from what I understand, did not conquer Egypt exactly. They didn't go in with an army and conquer Egypt. They just kind of moved in and insinuated themselves into society and eventually took over. They just became the king's advisors, and when the king died, they became the next king. They became the Hyksos monarchy, dynasty, the Hyksos dynasty. They lasted, if I remember correctly, again, I'm a little rusty on my history, but they lasted about 200 years. So shortly before Abraham, till shortly after Joseph, the Hyksos ruled Egypt. And the Hyksos were not descendants of Ham. They were descendants of Shem. They were a Semitic people from the east who moved in. During their reign, the original Egyptians were subjugated to kind of second-class citizens. Their reign ended when the original Egyptians rose up, conquered them, and kicked them out. Now, I'll talk about the Hyksos again in later videos, but we see this in this facsimile. The ruling class of Egypt at the time of Pharaoh were not descendants of Ham. You can see that because they are not depicted as being black. The slave guy, he is an original descendant of Ham. He is a true Egyptian. We'll put it that way. Now, one other note I do want to say, the book of Jasher also talks about how a Semitic people kind of took over in Egypt. And it's a very interesting story. I don't want to get into it a lot right now. But they do talk about it. And they explain how it happened. And it happened according to the book of Jasher in the early days of Abraham's life. Remember, Abraham was 75 or around there when he first comes to Egypt. So it was about 40 or 50 years before that, according to the book of Jasher, the Semitic people came in and became the ruling class of Egypt. Just wanted to mention that. So now let us look at figure 2. This is the strangest one, in my opinion. It's just very weird. So let's see. Figure 1 is in the dead center. Looks like some weird guy kind of squatting. Very, very odd. Kolob, signifying the first creation nearest to the celestial or the residence of God. First in government, the last pertaining to the measurement of time. The measurement according to the celestial time, which celestial time signifies 1 day to a cubit. 1 day in Kolob is equal to 1,000 years according to the measurement of this earth, which is called by the Egyptians Ja'oeh. So we're reading a little bit of ancient Egyptian here. Remember this is ancient Egyptian. Let's see. Number 2, figure directly above that. We got this guy standing there. Stands next to Kolob, called by the Egyptians Oliblish, which is the next grand governing creation near to the celestial, or the place where God resides, holding the key of power also pertaining to other planets, as revealed from God to Abraham, as he offered sacrifice upon an altar which he had built unto the Lord. Kolob's the great grand governing body there, and Oliblish is the second, kind of the vice president, you might say. Vice president of stars. Number 3. Let's see if I can find number 3. Yes, number 3 is this guy. Looks like he's sitting in a boat over here just to the right of number 2. Is made to represent God sitting upon his throne, clothed with power and authority, with a crown of eternal light upon his head, representing also the grand key words of the holy priesthood as revealed to Adam in the Garden of Eden, as also to Seth, Noah, Melchizedek, Abraham, and all to whom the priesthood was revealed. Now, if you've been to the temple, you know what that's talking about, but I'm not going to get into it in this video. But I do like the little circle above his head as apparently the crown of glory, the crown of eternal light. It's interesting. I'm not even sure how half of this stuff is supposed to represent what it claims to represent, but it's fascinating stuff. Number 4 is over on the left. We get this little bird, looks like she's in a boat. Answers to the Hebrew word rakien, signifying expanse, or the firmament of the heavens. Also a numerical figure, in Egyptian signifying 1,000, answering to the measuring of the time of Voliblish, which is equal with Kolob in its revolution and in its measuring of time. So this is a symbol of heaven, but also to symbolize the number 1,000. Okay, let's see. Number 5 is now just below number 1. We got to spin it over, and we get this cow-looking guy here. Is called in Egyptian Enish Goandash. Enish Goandash. This is one of the governing planets also, and is said by the Egyptians to be the sun, and to borrow its light from Kolob through the medium of Ka'i Vanrash, which is the grand key, or in other words, the moon, the governing power, which governs 15 other fixed planets or stars, as also Fluis, or the moon, the earth, and the sun in their annual revolutions. This planet receives its power through the medium of Kli Flosh Isis, or Ha-Kokwabim, the stars represented by numbers 22 and 23, which you will see on either side of figure 1. We're getting a lesson in how the universe works, the spiritual powers that hold the universe together. 6 represents this earth in its 4 quarters. That is these 4 figures standing over here. 7 represents God sitting upon his throne, revealing through the heavens the grand key words of the priesthood, as also the sign of the Holy Ghost unto Abraham in the form of a dove. So you see God on his throne, and you see the dove there. 8 contains writings that cannot be revealed unto the world, but is to be had in the holy temple of God. If you are familiar with the temple, you might have some guesses as to what that is. And most of the rest of this. 9 ought not to be revealed at the present time. 10 also. 11 also. If the world can find out these numbers, so let it be. Amen. And then 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 will be given in the own due time of the Lord. The above translation is given as far as we have any right to give at the present time. Now there you have it. It's a fascinating facsimile, and the majority of it, we are told we're not supposed to know what it means. I want to know! But, oh well.